Hello, on August the 12th, Monday, noon. And I've been meaning to talk about this album, which I think I think I showed this when I picked it up just briefly about, probably about a year ago. But I thought it was, what's the word? Pertinent? Prudent? No, not prudent. It was, well, the guy who formed and basically was this band. The band is the Chills. The guy who was behind the band, Martin Phillips, he passed away just would have been about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago now. 2 weeks probably. Now I know probably for people outside New Zealand, the Chills are probably you've probably never heard of them before, and probably never heard of Martin Phillips either. Although they did have some success overseas, but nothing really outside of a very niche kind of college radio type spectrum. But they were relatively big in New Zealand, but again, quite a niche band. I think their influence is bigger than their popularity, perhaps. They're one of those kinds of bands. I got this, I can't actually remember when or where. Actually, I think I do remember the shop, and I think it was $1. But that's just, I got an inkling it was. Anyway, you can see it's actually third hand because that person originally bought it second hand at Real Groovy Records. So it's at least third hand. At least 3 people have owned this before it got to my hands. The Chills are a kind of jangle, pop, rock, alternative rock band. They are part of what we in New Zealand call the Dunedin sound or the Flying Nun sound. There was a musical movement that sprung out of Dunedin. Dunedin is a city at the bottom of the South Island of New Zealand. It's quite a small city. I think it's got a population of around 100,000, 150,000. And it's a university town or a university city. So, it has a kind of quite a high student population. And in the late 70s, kind of with the advent of punk rock, kind of coming to New Zealand and getting popularity here, and then a punk scene, starting up here as well, being influenced by all the British and American bands of that genre, and then into the kind of post-punk new wave of the 80s. Around that time, a record label called Flying Nun Records was started in Dunedin. At the same time as a lot of these kind of bands were being formed, and they all had, I wouldn't say they all sounded similar, but maybe they had some similarity, some similarity in sound. It's a hard one to say. And so they kind of get grouped together as the Dunedin sound. And I'd say the Chills were part of that, certainly. They're one of the first bands that get named when that kind of group of bands are referenced. I think these guys started in 1981, when Martin Phillips was quite young. It might say here. And they were kind of famous. Okay, there we go. 1980, October 1980 is Chills Phase 1. They're kind of famous for having a lot of members. This Greatest Hits collection was produced only in the mid-90s. So this actually doesn't even go up. I think it eventually gets to 20 phases. So phase 1 through 14 is shown here with all the different members. And then after this goes out to October 92, 302. He died last week. They were still a going concern, although playing a lot less, obviously. And they got up to the 20th edition of the band. And the only constant in that was Martin Phillips, guitar and vocals and main songwriter. So you see he's named all the way down. Some other kind of members of that, or people involved in that, what do you call it? That scene, such as Peter Gutteridge. He was also I think he was in The Clean for a short while, and also his own band Snapper. And he might have been in a few other bands as well. There are some other names like David Kilgore. I think he was in The Clean as well. Being a small town, Dunedin, and even a small country in New Zealand, the bands can be quite incestuous, as in like band members can be in multiple bands or, show up in different things. To be honest, I've never really been the biggest fan of the whole Flying Nun Chicago, what was that? Dunedin sound. It's a bit too jangly for my tastes. There's songs that I like, but it's not, as a whole, it's not something I ever really liked. And the Chills are not a band I would buy their records, other than I found it secondhand for $1, and so I thought I'd pick it up. They've got a few songs that I do like, but I've never really got them, because people talk about the band with great reverence. Even, like I was saying, they had some popularity outside of New Zealand, and kind of like they're seen as quite influential, because you hear some quite famous, that's a relative term, musicians from other countries talking about the Chills in, quite, with great respect, and, and cite them as an influence, such as Stephen Malkmus from Pavement. He really loved the Chills and that Dunedin sound overall. Who else? Anton Newcombe from Brian Jonestown Massacre. He actually, I remember reading a quote, or maybe someone wrote the quote, that he said on something that he feels, which song was it? Pink Frost. Where is it? Oh, Pink Frost, that track there. He sees Pink Frost as one of the greatest songs ever written. One of the most perfect, maybe not the greatest, but the most perfect song. And I don't get that at all. I listened to that song, Pink Frost, and it's quite a strange song. It kind of starts off with this kind of like bouncy, chimey, kind of repeated guitar melody and bass line, and then it kind of goes into this other part where it kind of gets much quieter and loses the chimey melody part, and it has this kind of repetitive vocal line as well. It kind of puts me in the feeling of The Cure. Not that they sound like anything like The Cure, but it's a similar kind of feeling. It kind of, this kind of, at least that era of The Cure, quite strange and quite unlike other things, but at the same time, not something that I particularly like. Those first two songs there, Heavenly Pop Hit, that's probably their most famous song. That got to number 2 in the New Zealand singles charts back in the early 90s, or whenever it was released. I think it was released 1990. I Love My Leather Jacket, that was from the 80s, and that gets played quite a lot. You hear that around on like TV and stuff like that. He actually wrote that song. If you listen to the lyrics, I never actually did this, and this is another reason why I'm talking about this, is because after I heard he died, about 5 or 10 years ago, they made a documentary about Martin Phillips and about the Chills in general, but focusing on Martin Phillips. And it was released in the New Zealand Film Festival, again, like about 10 years ago. And I never got a chance to see it. And after he died 2 weeks ago, the maker or the producer of that documentary put it online for free. She uploaded it onto a website and allowed the public to watch it for free for a week period. And I watched it last weekend. And it was good. It's a very good documentary. However, it engendered those same feelings I have about the Chills music in general. You know, something, there is like kind of archetypes of certain kinds of people or groups or even artistic movements. And certain archetypes I mesh with well and I get. And even if I don't really like it, I can understand it. Whereas other archetypes, I don't connect with. And that's not through lack of trying or giving it a chance. It just doesn't resonate with my brain for some reason. And that is the feeling I get anytime that kind of Dunedin, Flying Nun, The Chills type sound discussion, whatever comes up. And it's kind of strange. I don't even know what it is exactly. When I watched that documentary, it was quite sad and a little bit depressing, but also interesting. It focused a lot on Martin Phillips, on his health issues. That, you know, he died last week. He was only 61. You know, 61 is nowadays is young, isn't it? But I guess for a rock star or a musician, it's not that young because they've got a much reduced lifespan, it seems. He got quite heavily into drugs in the 90s, particularly opiates, to the point he was injecting whatever he was injecting. You know, in New Zealand, it's hard to come by heroin. The washing machine is turned off. It's being a little remote, isolated island in the West Pacific. Drugs do come here, but it seems to be certain kinds of drugs, and for whatever reason, I guess blessedly and thankfully, heroin scene has always passed our country by. We've been hit. Meth is big here and is a problem. Is the cause of so many of social problems in this country is fucking methamphetamine, and marijuana is obviously because that's homegrown is massive. That's kind of like almost just like well, it's legalized in many countries now, isn't it? It's still not legalized here, but it's so socially acceptable and normalized that it might as well be. But opiates, you've got to kind of make a real effort, I'd imagine, if you were going to be addicted to opiates in this country. You'd have to have some sort of connection to a pharmaceutical supplier of some sort, or a doctor, a friend, or I know they were doing home bake in the 80s. I don't know if they still do that. It's kind of like home. I think they were getting the codeine out of paracetamol and what do you call it, isolating that and using that, whatever. He was involved in that quite badly, and he got stuck with a needle of another user, and that guy had hepatitis C, and Martin contracted hepatitis C. And at the same time, he was drinking heavily, as he had been, I guess most of his career, being a musician. Alcohol goes together with those two things. And his liver was just decimated. And there's the opening part of the documentary where basically the nurse or the doctor, whoever the specialist is, basically, you're dying. There's a pretty high chance you're going to be dead within a year. If you even sniff a glass of alcohol, it could kill you. It's quite confronting, obviously for him, but even for the viewer, just to see that kind of brutal diagnosis, prognosis. And so that kind of clouds the whole documentary after that. All the interviews you're doing, and all the things he's doing, he's kind of like, he's determined to kind of, he's a hoarder or a collector, and he's a lot of crap in his house. And he's kind of determined to catalogue it and get rid of the stuff he doesn't need, and maybe even have some sort of exhibition of his knickknacks or his art. And so that's kind of the overarching theme of the documentary, is him getting his life together with the knowledge that he may be checking out anytime. At the same time, he's undergoing a experimental treatment for hepatitis C. The first one is not successful. Apparently, it works in like 80% of patients. It cures it, but for him, it didn't. And also, there's the fact that once you get past a certain point, your liver is so damaged. Like whatever hepatitis C does, what it makes it like, gives it cirrhosis or something similar. Your liver is so badly damaged that it can't repair itself. The liver is as everyone always hears, it's quite an amazing organ that it can regenerate itself to an extent, maybe more than any other organ in our body. But once it gets past a certain tipping point, there's not much you can do. But then he did get successful treatment on the second drug he tried, medicine, and so that gave him a much better prognosis moving forward. And that was kind of the end of the movie, kind of the happy ending. At the same time, he was still not a completely healthy person, but obviously it gave, I guess it bought him almost like maybe half a decade, because he only passed away just this last week, 2024. So like I said, I'm not sure when that documentary was made. I think it was around 2016, maybe. Definitely pre-COVID. But just hearing him talk and the way he talks about things, the way he talks about music, just interesting, but not something I really relate to. Really rambled a lot there, haven't I? So I would say, if you never heard the Chills before, give them a listen. I'd say Heavenly Pop Hit is probably the best introduction to them. I think that's just a great pop rock song. Interesting lyrics as well. I like the first liner lyrics. I heard that song a million times, and I never looked at the lyrics until quite recently. Each evening, the sun fades, and each evening the sun sets in 5 billion faces, seen by 10 billion eyes, set in 5 billion. I can't remember. It's a good song though. The others I wouldn't go out of my way to listen to personally, but like I said, a lot of people love them. If Stephen Malkmus of Pavement loves them, and I love Pavement, I've always liked Pavement since I was a kid. Since I was 12 or 13, I liked Pavement. And he really loves the Chills. So who am I to say? Who am I to be the purveyor of what is good and not good? And it's not even saying I'm not even saying it's not good. I'm not listening to this and going, this is shit. It's just like I listen to it and think, yeah, it's kind of just that kind of jangle pop rock sound. Yeah, it is what it is. But I don't get the fuss, I guess is what I'm saying. But I'm not saying it's bad music at all. These other two here, which I to kind of connect in some way, I've shown these before as well. When I picked these up earlier this year. And the reason I'm showing these is these are both Flying Nun collated albums as well. Flying Nun Records. You can't see it down there, but it is the logo of Flying Nun Records. These are both soundtracks to movies that came out in the 1990s. These are all Flying Nun bands. The 3Ds, the Bats, the Clean. The Clean are probably one of the most famous. 3Ds again, Superette, Snapper, that was Peter Gooderidge's band. The Chills, as we were just talking about. Straight Jacket Fits, probably another one of the most famous Flying Nun bands. The Clean again. The Clean, if you might have heard their song Tally Ho, which is actually incidentally being used right now on TV for an ad, a TV advertisement advertising the University of Otago, which is the university in Dunedin. So this song written almost over 40 years ago, that really represents Dunedin, is being used to advertise the university in Dunedin 40 years later. And Chris Knox. Now Chris Knox is someone who's closely associated with that scene. He was more on kind of the punk edge of it. He had a band called the Tall Dwarves as well. And Another person I've never really understand all the fuss about him. That song there, Not Given Lightly, is kind of one of the most famous songs in New Zealand. It's been used for so many things, and you might even recognize it if you listen to it. But it's I just don't get all the fuss about that guy, Chris Knox. He had a stroke, sadly, probably about 10, 15 years ago, and he's very much limited. But he's talked in reverential tones as well. So those bands there, and over here, what do you got? Again, Bike. Now, Bike was, over here I mentioned Straight Jacket Fits. I've talked about them before. Straight Jacket Fits are probably the one Dunedin Flying Nun band that I do quite like a lot. And there's something different about them. There's a darkness about Straight Jacket Fits. And Shane Carter, the singer and main songwriter, or kind of co-songwriter for a while. Straight Jacket Fits kind of had two periods, and there was the guitarist of the band, Andrew Bruff. He had a much more melodic, bright, kind of musical sensibility. So he added that to the music, whereas Shane Carter was much more on the punk, rock, darker, harder part. And so the combination of the Andrew Bruff brightness and the Shane Carter darkness kind of made it for some interesting songs. But Andrew Bruff felt that he was not valued, and he couldn't, he couldn't really artistically put himself out as much as he wanted to. And so he left the band and he formed the band Bike. Not my kind of thing. Kind of a similar vein to the Chills, actually. Kind of that very bright, jangly pop, well-written, well-crafted songs, but not for me. Headless Chickens are another kind of band you hear a lot about for them. Love's Ugly Children were later. The Verlaines, that's another band you hear a lot about. They were kind of one of the earlier Dunedin sound bands. And then down there, Straight Jacket Fits, I was talking about She Speeds, probably my favorite Straight Jacket Fits song. So yeah, the main thing I was talking about was that one there, the Chills. So I guess, yeah, that's all I really would say is that he died, Martin Phillips died, and that's a shame. He was only still quite young, but he kind of fit quite a lot into his 61 years. He will always be kind of one of the pillars of New Zealand rock history. Whether I particularly like his music or not, that's just a fact. And yeah, if you are interested in that kind of music, I'd say you could do worse than have a listen to the Chills. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Thank you for watching.